All right. So, and we are recording. So, all right. So today we are going to talk about emotions, to eat or to not to eat. And we've got ourselves with Colette, and we've got currently Maria on the call to kind of watch along. So, but basically today what we're going to do is we have people who are dealing with emotional eating during stressful times, and we're in the middle of a pandemic. Emotions are raging, right? And a lot of people deal with those emotions and have been dealing with those emotions for months now by overeating, which leads to the COVID-19 extra weight gain. Colette, do you want to kind of summarize like some of the things we're going to chat about during this? It's such a broad topic. This is like a monster. This is an iceberg. What we're going to try and keep this kind of digestible for everybody to watch. What are some of the things we're really going to focus on during this little chit chat we're going to have?
Yeah, just talking about definitely emotions, because we've all heard that term emotional eating, and what I really want to hit at today is just what to do when these emotions come. How do you process emotion? Because if we don't process our emotions, most of us don't like it when uncomfortable feelings come and we just want to push them away, and we'll push them away with, or just escape them, whatever that is. I mean, you can go eating, you can go drinking, you can go shopping, you can get angry, whatever it is that you do to try and push emotion away. But or stuff it. And so if that's our choice in emotion, that's not healthy, because emotions are actual physiological components in our brain, in our bodies, and they will get stored somewhere, and they will actually come out in dysfunctional ways, whether it hurts the people around us because of the ways we interact with them, or it actually can start physiologically changing our bodies, and we can get sick because of suppressed emotions or stuffed emotions. And of course, the loop that starts going on in your brain, and just that constant like wired and all night up, and the anxiety that can come from some of the stuff. So basically today, I just want to talk about very simplistically, what do you do when emotion shows up? And how do you process it in a way that at least gets it up and out, and not something that you just want to, eat and shove down, which, for me would be chocolate. So yeah, that's my nemesis.
I was chatting with a potential client this morning, and she's like, she's a nurse, dialysis nurse, and she's like, yep, the drive to Sheets for some greasy food just helps me tamp down on the stress. So, yeah. Well, then let's kick this thing off. So, emotionally eating doesn't just exist in a vacuum. They say that there's a fork in the road, and then you kind of make this decision. So, kind of let's chat about how this starts during the day, right? The day exists. You go through. This is typically what are the triggers? What are the events that usually kick off this emotional eating?
Yeah. The first thing to do is just recognize your patterns, right? I mean, we've got typically 3 meals a day, and then our snacks, depending on what kind of program Mark has you on.
Mm-hmm.
And if you find yourself in the kitchen or digging into that chocolate box, when it's not the time, you notice that pattern. Notice that the fact that you're standing in front of that cupboard reaching for something new. What is it that happened right before that moment that you're in the kitchen doing your thing? And there's a lot of things that can show up for that. So like one of the things that often happen with people is if they're like in a place of transition. So you're at home now because of COVID, and you're working in your office, and then you've got to hop off and maybe go tend to a child or go tend to something, whatever it is. Or maybe you're just shifting between tasks, and you get up and you move around and you find yourself in the kitchen, and you just kind of reach out and pop a little something in your mouth. So it may just be like you find that you're transitioning through the kitchen and you end up eating. That could be, hey, that's a trigger. Like, this is what I do. I'm eating when I'm transitioning. So that tells me that there's something going on in your transition or in your mental space that needs paid attention to instead of eaten, right?
Mm-hmm.
Or maybe you're just bored. or maybe you're in the habit of sitting in front of the television and that's kind of become your habit. Again, there's some kind of emotional fix or like, and I say emotional fix in terms of it's satisfying some kind of emotional component that's not being tended to by eating. Another thing that often can trigger emotional eating would be something like conflict. I don't know if you've ever noticed, maybe you have conflict with a child or with a spouse or your significant other, and you are really riled up. And just, whatever's happened has happened. And you're in that kitchen and you're like, I just need that something right now. And again, it's mindless. You're not necessarily thinking about it, but as you eat it, there's a level of just kind of satisfaction that comes. So this is the interesting thing about eating, I think, especially in terms of conflict, is we're in a fight or flight moment. Our stress levels have been kicked up and we're anxious and our body is trying to escape or we're trying to get away. The action of eating is actually it calms you down physiologically, because think about it. If there's an animal out in the wild, if he's eating, then he's not afraid of its predator. So in a way, there's a physiological response that eating does bring that emotional like flare up down. But unfortunately, if you eat too much, we obviously don't like the waistline side effects of that. Does that make sense?
Yeah, obviously with yoga and meditation, also breathing through the nose, it's like it cues into the sympathetic nervous system. I guess, fight or flight, typically the mouth is open and you're kind of, trying to cram air into the system. But when you're eating too, it's slower. You have to breathe through your nose. And then all of a sudden it's a cascade of things that are triggering. All right, now it's time to relax.
Yeah. Yeah. So there is a physiological reason why we try eat when we've been fight or flighted, when we've been thrown into that limbic, terror phase or whatever it is. And then of course the other obviously one which kind of comes along with the conflict thing is when a lot of us eat when we have emotional content that is rising that we don't know what to do with, and we live in a society that isn't comfortable with emotions, right?
Mm-hmm.
We don't go around and like chit chat real deeply about what's going on in our heart today, and so we don't want to deal with emotion. And it seems like it could be like a weak thing to be an emotional person, and I know in some of my raising, it was, kind of anyone who was emotional was just kind of too much to handle. And so somewhere along the line, we may have learned to go, this is not okay to be emotional. It's not okay to like have a visceral experience. And so I've got to shut it down as quickly as possible. So when emotions rise, we don't know what to do with it. And again, that eating helps to just kind of push it down. There's also a release of all kinds of, hormonal release, that just kind of satiates some of that anxiety and that nervousness. And so that's why we're eating. But it's important to recognize that you have moments that you're standing in front of that cupboard reaching for food that isn't your normal mealtime. And so recognize what those potential triggers are, because when you're there, you've got to stop in that place and start doing the work.
Yeah, I think that's the the rough one is to kind of snap yourself out of that moment and realize, it's the eating is not the problem, it's the thing before the eating.
Right.
And so obviously, I think, it's like, obviously you've got to recognize, like, I don't want to do these things anymore. I don't want to overeat. I don't want to stress eat. Like, you have to obviously say, like, this is an issue.
Yeah.
And then you notice, like, when do these things happen? And again, it could be sitting on the couch. It could be mindless. Like, I just get food every time I go through the kitchen, or every time right before I go to work, or every time right as I finish work, or after an argument or something like that. And then once you notice that, like, what's kind of the next thing? It's like, because that's that's that moment you gotta address it, right? Yeah. You gotta make change. I got a frog in my throat here, but essentially you've got to like look at it right in its ugly face, these emotions or these feelings or this situation or whatever it is. Yeah. For somebody who wants to like do the work to stare it in his face and start to solve it,
Mhm.
Kind of what would be a process for, starting?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, the first thing is get out of the kitchen and go find a comfy spot, right? Just go like pick a chair, maybe go sit on the back patio, but just find a place where you can be relatively uninterrupted, if possible. Obviously I know sometimes it's not entirely there, but the first thing I would do is take a couple of deep breaths. Again, if your fight or flight system has been activated, by taking deep breaths, you can really just kind of start to physiologically slow down that heartbeat and slow down the breathing. And that physiologically just kind of gets you out of your reactive brain and helps you come back into a place of logic and reasoning, where your prefrontal cortex comes back online, if you like. So just a couple of deep breaths. I always say, like, take in a breath to the count of 3 and then release to a count of 5 or 6. Always release your breath a little longer than the one that you're taking in, because that's how you're going to slow yourself down. So once you've done just a few breaths, it's worthwhile to sit there and just start asking yourself, okay, so what am I feeling right now? And I actually have a feeling wheel. If you want, you can Google it. Google feeling wheel. I'm going to share my screen real quickly and show you what that looks like. But this is an example of a feeling wheel. Can you see that?
Yep.
And so it's great because right at the center, you've got real basic emotion like fear, anger, sadness, joy, surprise, love. And then it kind of spreads out to give a few more words for what you can use to kind of identify what you're feeling in the moment. I don't know if you ever watched that movie Inside Out, where there's joy, sadness, disgust, anger, that, they're all kind of at the helm. Those are like your basic core emotions, and then they kind of spread out. But I like this feeling wheel because it's helpful to just kind of give you some language, to just give you some kind of words for what's going on inside of you. And research shows that just naming the emotion takes some of the power out of it. Because a lot of us are afraid of experiencing emotion because it can feel so overwhelming. Like you feel like you're going to get lost in emotion. But just naming it and just going, man, right now I feel super disappointed. Like just saying that, you can feel there's a little bit of that release happening. It takes a little bit of the power, that overwhelming feeling that you have from that emotion. So just take the time to see, can you name what's going on? You may not be able to name what's going on. You may be the kind of person that feels it in your body. So that's where you just say, okay, so I don't know what I'm feeling right now necessarily. I don't know if I can name it, but maybe you can describe where you're feeling it. So some people may feel like incredible tension in their shoulders, right? And you just kind of feel that tensing up. I know when, for example, for me, when I'm going through a lot of pain, I kind of feel this thing like rising up. And that's, my thing is I start running around and start cleaning the house, right? Because I don't want to pay attention to it.
Yeah.
But I can feel it rising up, and so even just describing that motion, some people talk about they just get butterflies in their stomach, or just maybe you're clenching your hands, but just start noticing in your body where this feeling is or where this emotion is, and just pay attention to it. We talk about mindfulness a lot. And so just focusing in on that, what you're doing is you're acknowledging the emotion, you're giving it a voice, and you're just validating it. So it's a great exercise in self-compassion. And you're going, man, what now? Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I think that too, part of the process of being this emotional is also this fear of it. Like, this is where I'm at, and then it's going to escalate.
Yeah.
And so I think too, it's if you name it, like, man, I'm really disappointed.
Mm-hmm.
It's kind of it. You realize, like, oh, okay, if I'm disappointed, like, it's not just going to magically escalate into anger and murder and all the most terrible things, but it's just like, this is where it's actually at, and now I can kind of put some boundaries around it.
Yeah. And also if you do acknowledge I'm disappointed, then you can also go, oh, what am I disappointed about? And then you can actually start responding to that emotion instead of just trying to shove it down. Then you've actually got something to work with, and that'll be content for another conversation. But yes, by naming it, by acknowledging it, you're kind of like you're letting that emotion to come up and out and just move through you, so that it's not trapped and stuck and showing up in all those horrible toxic ways. And it's also interesting with emotion, sometimes as you're noticing and as you name it, it can kind of change. So like as you're describing maybe these butterflies in your stomach, and you're saying, okay, so I think this is anxiety and I'm really anxious. You know, you keep doing some of that breath work and you go, okay, so some of these butterflies now they're moving off to the side, or they're kind of lifting, they're morphing into, you know, concern, or they're morphing into a level of grief, you know, whatever that story is. But sometimes that emotion, there's multiple layers. And again, as you just simply name it and notice it, it's a way to get it to move up and through you, instead of just suck it up and hope it'll somehow absorb itself and disappear. But
yeah, or clamp it down and hope you know, shove it into the deep down into the gut so you never see it again.
right, into that little pressure cooker.
Mm-hmm.
It
Yeah, the pressure
eventually
cooker
erupts into crazy. Yeah. But it's but like I said, there could be multiple emotions, and one of the emotions that's really interesting to watch is anger. And I say anger is always a secondary emotion, and I say that because there's always something that happened first. But most of us jump to anger so quickly, like we're so used to diving into anger so fast that we don't realize something happened just before, because anger feels very powerful. I can really move people with my anger, right? And so it feels powerful, and it pushes away whatever came first. And typically what comes before anger is a variation of two different emotions. It's either pain, and that's because somebody has crossed a boundary, or fear, which means somebody's threatening a boundary. And so again, it's that pushing to kind of, you know, get space from what's going on. So if you recognize you're in anger, tell yourself, okay, what happened first? You know, maybe something was threatened, or something really hurt. And so if you can process what you're afraid of, or process what's hurting, that anger doesn't have to morph into, you know, the murder or the rage.
Mm-hmm.
And you can really manage it and respond to it at that primary level at which it happened. So
I just
yeah.
noticed your pupper behind you. I was like, what is going on?
Yeah, she's taking up space on Billy's side of the bed. He resents her for that. Anyway, but here's the other thing, real quick, about the emotion, and again, where we feel like we can get overwhelmed, feel like it's a bit too much.
Mm-hmm.
Logically, if emotion were just a chemical release, which it has obviously a chemical component to it,
Mm-hmm.
that the theory is, and I say this in theory, okay, because if it were just a biological experience, emotion lasts for 90 seconds, and that's it. So if an emotion rises up, and if we give voice to it and allow it to come, ultimately it should resolve within 90 seconds. Now, if it's not resolving, chances are there's some kind of story or thing you're telling yourself to kind of feed it. You know, maybe you keep reading that Facebook post or you're sitting in front of that newsreel and it's just like firing you up. That emotion will keep building. But if you just notice the emotion and give it permission to come without constantly feeding it with more thinking or whatever it is that was firing it, you know, you keep thinking about that conflict you had. If you just give the emotion its space, it'll ultimately resolve 90 seconds. Again, I say that theoretically, because
Mm-hmm.
the actual living out of that takes a lot of hard work.
Yeah, I noticed for myself, and I'm sure a lot of people do this, but I'll get, someone will have said something offensive, most likely offhand. They didn't realize it was like I took offense to it, or I was like, that was rude. And then I will replay the conversation I should have with them in my head, and it just escalates, and I almost fantasize this, like knockdown, drag out argument that I'm going to have.
Mm-hmm.
The reality is, if I just like, hey man, that was kind of rude, like,
yeah,
or whatever, whoever I'm chatting with. But in my head, like, I'll just, I'll be like washing the dishes and just be like, right, and going into this really sour, evil, make believe conversation, which keeps me riled up for a really long time.
Yeah.
And then obviously, how do I resolve that?
Yeah.
Well, at this point, I'm not going to have a conversation with that person. I'm too riled up.
Right. That could get very dangerous.
Yeah. How do I get myself off this cliff? Like,
yeah.
And again, people don't like go for jogs at this point. It's like,
no.
Again, the food and the alcohol or whatever, the release.
Yeah. And even in that one, it's sometimes it's just simply as going, that really sucked. Like, I'm angry because he said something that really like hit me. And that hurt, dadgummit. Like that's,
Mm-hmm.
ugh. And sometimes it's enough to just go, that hurt, and just let it hurt and be okay with that. And
Well,
once
and also, and that's the same thing too. And also like recognizing like, because I remember as I start to do this work, I would also catch myself, not at that moment where I'm like, oh, that hurts, but actually I would catch myself 20 minutes into this make-believe conversation that I would have. And I'm like, and I'm like, oh my God, like this, I am, doing this to myself. Like I'm having these stupid conversations in my head and kind of snapping myself out of it. And then I can identify faster and faster and faster to the point where I'm like, in that moment, I'm like, oh, that was offensive.
Yeah.
Right. Or that was rude, or that was what, or I feel attacked, and then I can say like, okay, I, feel in that moment, I can say like, this is the feeling. And this is a lot of the times for me.
Yeah. And I like what you said there. You said if I keep going 20 minutes later, I realize, wait a second, I'm the one who's hurting myself at this point.
Oh, it's bad. It's like really bad.
That person like walked away and didn't even know that they're still involved, and I'm like, oh, and I'm doing damage to myself, which is why this whole process of like allowing emotions to come and letting them move up and out is a very key piece of self-compassion. Like it's okay to feel hurt. Like it doesn't make you weak. It doesn't make you less of a person. It just is. There's an element of non-judgment that happens as you experience emotion. There it is. That's the emotion. Not good, not bad. It just is.
And obviously this isn't going to you're not going to fix yourself in one moment of saying, I'm disappointed. Right. This is a routine that you need to do.
Yeah.
And like, you've got to be, head on a swivel at all times, realizing like I can get trapped in this vortex of emotions and all that. I need to snap myself out of it.
Yeah. Because when you get in that space and you can't calm down, that's when the food comes up. And then you just like eat that whole bag of chips.
Yeah, you just black out and all of a sudden like the chips are gone and yeah.
Oreos,
yeah, I'm on my fifth drink, finish that bottle of wine kind of thing.
Yeah.
All right, so now we were kind of going over this. Is there anything else that I kind of have that one question that I'd like to finish on, but is there anything else that we need to cover as far as this like dealing with emotions? I know this is just the tip of the iceberg. I don't think we can really get into it.
I think the one concept that's really struck me in the past that has been helpful, and in terms of like experiencing emotion, is just the reality is, I think sometimes we make emotions either bad emotions or good emotions. And I would say to you, there is no good or bad emotions. That in life we will have both. I think I've seen the image of like it's a train track. Life is a train track, and on the one side we have joy, and on the other side we have sorrow. And that it's good for us to experience both, because if we never experience sorrow, we'll never know what joy is. And we will not be able to fully experience just the absolute like elation of an amazing moment if we don't understand sorrow. And I think that's where we get sold short in the society that always wants to sell us happiness and amazingness all the time. But the reality is life requires us to be able to process both the joy and the sorrow. If all we're looking for is joy, 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 then we've got to be happy about COVID. Then we've got to be happy about all this like racist crap that's going on right now in America. Then we've got to be happy about the divisions that we face. And that's not the case. We have to learn how to be like feel these emotional moments through life. And that's just how it is. So it's not wrong. It's not bad. But the more we learn how to just be okay with those things happening, I think the better we'll be able to manage our own internal worlds and ultimately our relationships with one another in ways that are far more beneficial and useful. For coming together again. So.
Yeah, it's definitely, especially when you feel happy, you've defined happiness in relation to some other feeling.
Yeah.
It's not like happiness is the only thing that exists. So yeah, you're right. It's like, if your happiness is only that much, then that's where the Prozac comes in, right? It just levels everything out. You don't have any emotions at all.
Yeah, you're just numb. That's no fun.
Now we were kind of talking about this. It's like the whole getting started to have this hard conversation. This is kind of the last thing, and then maybe Maria has a question she wants to jump in with. But you know, for a lot of people they recognize that there is a habit of overeating, overindulging, you know, some sort of, you can call it self-destructive, but some sort of like way of numbing that stuff, right? The emotional eating. And then when you kind of tell them like, well, you got to do these things, you got to go in, you got to, you know, kind of recognize that you're having it, you got to, and then, you know, I think for a lot of people, there's like, well, I don't want to give up this favorite food of mine. Like, what would you say to them? You know, because the stuff that we're going over, it's not like this is rocket science. It's not like this is mind blowing. It may be kind of more comprehensive than they've read before in the past, you know, or someone's told them, but it's definitely not like, you know, the secret to the universe or anything like that.
Right.
So it's kind of boring.
Yeah.
It's not exciting. You don't put it on Instagram. You don't go on Facebook and let me tell you about the 10 minutes I spent with myself going over my thoughts.
Yeah.
So if someone's like, well, if that means I have to give up my ice cream every night, you know, and I don't want to do that.
Yeah.
How do you kind of, how does that conversation usually go?
Well, I mean, we had a hard time trying to even answer that question. I think it's very individual. I think there may be somebody who doesn't have a deep enough why as to why they want to get healthy. You know, sometimes it's just a matter of, I think we live in a culture that wants to give, you know, you can have your cake and eat it too. And or health just, they want that, you know, we've got a culture that always wants to offer us quick fixes. When the reality is quick fixes are seldom give you the deep-seated, deeply satisfying results that just come from hard work and that place of satisfaction because you put in everything that you needed to get to this place where you are today. So I don't know, that's a tough one. What's your take on that one, Mark?
We were like riffing on this and I have so many thoughts.
Yeah.
You know, so there's kind of the two things that really resonate with me. It's a lot of people are not, you know, they agree with the idea of like, all right, I've got to look at my emotions and like have hard conversations about why I feel like that. I think everybody agrees with that.
Yeah.
I don't think you're not going to have an argument around like, this isn't important. I think the issue is the giving up of the ice cream or the food or whatever. Like that's the problem. And so the first thing is like a lot of the times, you know, it's like, well, if I feel like this, I don't like how I feel, but I'm having the ice cream, right? Which has kind of brought me out of the dumps or whatever. And I give up the ice cream, like, how am I going to feel? And so it's not necessarily that, it's kind of this matter of like the unknown. You know, so a lot of the times I would say it's like, well, you know, let's kind of role play into the situation. What happens if you do give up? Like, what is the worst case scenario that is going to happen to you if you don't have ice cream on a Tuesday night, like as you sit on the couch? Literally, like spell it out. Like, what is the worst thing that is going to happen? Is someone going to murder you? You know, is your house going to burn down? Right? And I say that kind of comically, but you know, sometimes it can feel like the world is coming to the end if I don't have this home base that I can come to and be safe, right? Like in a game of tag, like I can go to this home base. Yeah. And then, you know, when you realize like, oh, I can handle, you know, yes, I can go one night without ice cream, but what happens if I never have ice cream ever again? Is that what you're telling me? And that's not what we're telling them, but you know, sometimes that's also a conversation that we need to get into. And then the second thing would be like, you know, as you kind of talk them down from the ledge, like, no, this is like, actually, we need to separate these emotions and the food but like, if you've got to do this stuff and this is the work, a lot of the times it's finally the wool is pulled from your eyes. And so a lot of the times it's now no longer like, all right, what should I do? But it's rather, are you going to do the work? And if it's no, then that's fine.
Yeah.
But you're obviously going to suffer with this emotional turmoil.
Right. You're not going to get any different results.
Yeah, it's just like if you're not going to do the work, then get ready for the same stuff.
Yeah.
If you hate how you feel because you're emotionally eating, well, that's going to continue happening. So you have to do something different to get different results.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
Maria, do you have any questions you wanted to add here?
Does everybody has a emotional relationship with food, or skinny people just don't? Like, I always wonder if it's just me. Like, I'm always thinking like, I used to be bulimic as a teenager, so I have a odd relationship with food. I like by my side. I don't want it to put in front of me, ahead or behind me. So it's odd. But I always wonder, now I'm not, but I don't know if this constant thinking is normal. Everybody has it. Is everybody actually thinking, I know I only need to eat 3 of this or 2 of this, so on? Do we all struggle?
I think based on your history and even culture and even what some of your training has been, there's different levels of it. Does that make sense? So there's different levels of amount of thinking toward food that you have. And I think especially if it's been there for a long time, you won't necessarily completely eradicate it. So you may not never think about food in those terms again, but the more aware you are of how you have responded to it, the more power you have to then choose differently. And I think the power of those thoughts go down. Does that make sense? They don't necessarily completely go away, but their power goes down as you give more power to the choices that you make. So instead of using food for comfort, you learn to use other things to nurture yourself, whether it's a good bubble bath or just a walk around the block. You give more power to those things and you start experiencing the benefit of it. The power of those thoughts come down. I don't think they'll ever completely go away, but they certainly don't have to rule your life. So it's different for everyone. It really, but at some level, we all have a relationship with food. The other thing is they're talking about the gut. It's not like our secondary brain. That's where like the majority of serotonin is produced. So food will always impact us in some way to our moods, to our emotions. So there's always going to be some kind of connection to that. And we've just got to learn, individually what it is for each one of us and how we want to, set the tone and how we want to, make those choices. Does that help?
Yeah, it does. And then the other thing is, I don't think I can, like you said with the wheel, I don't think I can name an emotion all the time. For example, right now with COVID, I like my life in a certain way, in a certain structure that keeps me at my best weight. The whole COVID, I gain, I lose, and it's only been a couple pounds, but I've noticed it in my clothing that now that it's uncertain what's going to happen with everything, I've been thinking it's God that's trying to teach me patience, and then things change again, and I don't know how to adjust to this new normal when I really enjoy my structure, and it's hard for me to set a structure for myself. And that's when I find myself in the kitchen. It's like it's 9 o'clock, I didn't go to the gym, and I'm like, okay, I'm trying to plan the day for myself and follow it. It's so difficult. And I like the structure when it's, I have to go to work, the kids go to school, but I also enjoy summer. It's just this potentially perpetual summer kind of schedule that I don't think I'm going to enjoy. Because it's going to throw me off completely, because I don't like the idea of setting structure for myself, because I start spinning and, it's like, where do I start? And I don't start anywhere. And then all of a sudden I find myself in the kitchen, because I guess it's that I know how to do. You can sit and eat. That's easy to do.
That's an easy escape. That's an easy
escape. It is. So it's like, okay, where do I start? oh,
Yeah.
maybe I just get a snack and figure it out.
Well, you know,
But then it's
another
and
way
after that,
to
it's a pattern that,
right.
once I start kind of like eating, it's like, oh, I messed it up. I rather don't get there
Yeah.
with.
Yeah, I think what you're describing is, and this would kind of be like the next conversation that we probably need to go to, is another way that once you recognize that emotion, because you're talking about, you're taking in so much information and you're just feeling overwhelmed by all the choices that you have to make. And you're just feeling overwhelmed by all the things that have to shift and change. And that feeling of overwhelm and too much is often what leads us to look for comfort in food. And so that's the stuff where, again, this is where one of the things that may be helpful is just sit down and write all those thoughts out and start getting them on paper. That's another way to get emotions up and out. Get them on paper, and then you can actually sit back and be a little bit more objective in terms of going, is this as bad as I thought it was? Is this necessarily something I need to be concerned of? And that's how you can start, kind of making sense of what's going on, in this emotional kind of explosion right now. And so then from there, you can start figuring out just the next first step, if it's building into your structure. So every day I will always sit down and pick 3 things. And those are the 3 things I'm going to make sure that happen every day, and that's my structure. It doesn't have to be like a completely full day structure, but at least it's 3 basic things I can focus on that will bring a level of just kind of clarity and organization to my day. But like I said, I think that's kind of next level conversation, is once you've recognized that overwhelm emotion and you've got it out, that's when you can start, okay, so how do I organize these? How do I want to make decisions out of this place now that I have it written down and it's not just swirling in my head?
Yeah.
Make sense?
It does. It does.
I have 2 things that help me in those situations. One is the getting out. What I do is I write, so I physically put it somewhere, so I don't have to keep it in my head, but I write it as if I'm telling somebody all my problems. So I'm kind of voicing and venting and frustration and kind of exercising that release of frustration in a very tangible way versus just like listing my feelings. Like I'm doing the same thing, but this is an exercise. It's kind of like I'm telling somebody, but I'm not actually telling somebody my secrets, right? So I can be as honest and I can go as deep as I want. And I can be like, so-and-so's been pissing me off, and, I've got so much work, and, I didn't think I was going to pay this bill that came out of, and so you can vent everything that's going on and just get it off your chest. And then the second thing, which is what I notice that I do, and this is what everybody does, is I constantly catch myself after I've written all this stuff out, is I've given every single issue, problem, frustration, disappointment, the same level of importance in my brain. And so what happens is now, and everybody has like 30 to 40, 50 things they have to do during the day, but like brushing your teeth and like getting ready for bed is like something you have to do, but it's not nearly as important as if like your kid gets sick. And yet when you have 30 or 40 or 50 things you have to do, it just looks like this insurmountable mountain of problems, and it's overwhelming. But then, like Colette's saying, now if you realize like I have all of these things, and again, like, I'm giving too much importance to these menial, trivial issues, which are not even my responsibility or something that I need to take care of in like 6 weeks. Then all of a sudden you realize like, oh, okay, this is not actually a mountain I have to climb. This is more, maybe not a molehill. I mean, everybody has issues, but like it's way more manageable. Yeah. So, when you look at it and you write it all out, and then you like look at it, and it takes away the power, the kind of the frustration or something like that, and you realize like, oh, okay, oh, this will take me like 30 seconds to do. I can knock this one out really easy. And then again, it's like you're able to, confront those things in a just more rational way.
Yeah.
So
you're right.
I deal with that all the time. And it's, again, I catch myself. I'm like, the littlest thing is just as important, in my mind in the moment as my kid getting sick, which it absolutely is not. But until I write that stuff out, like I just get like this subconscious trapped and I'm just like, this day is impossible. And then I don't do anything. It's like I just find myself floating through the day because stuff is so big that I don't do anything. And that's usually what kicks me into like, all right, I have to do something different. Like I have to fix this thing. And those are two things that I've started doing during the coronavirus that has been really helpful.
Yeah, and then some of those things you never think of them as feelings. You know, for example, being confused. Is that a feeling, or is just I'm confused? You know, it's like, what is this? Or being bored. Do you feel bored, or are you bored? I don't know. Or not knowing where to start. I don't know if those are feelings or just things that happen in your life right now that are messing me up.
Yeah.
But
it's not necessary, and I don't think you need to worry about categorizing it as much as getting it up and out and acknowledging them and looking at it. Because if you don't get it out of the swirl in your mind, if you don't get it out of what's going on in your head, that's where you get into trouble. And so I love Mark's suggestion, get it up and out, and then from there you can look at, man, what's really important and what isn't.
Okay. And then are they days where sometimes I'm a mom, 3 kids, I have a dog, 2 cats. Sometimes, you know, I start to structure my day and give me little tasks that will keep me structured so that not thinking about food. Sometimes I wish I didn't have to or have 0 things to do for that day.
Yeah.
But then I don't allow me something like that unless I'm on vacation. I don't know. But now even with COVID, because you may think, well, nobody's here to see or nobody's controlling me. So it's 0 valid or doing very little. But then I know that if it's not as, you know, there's a certain limit of structure that will keep me comfortable eating or not thinking about food. But some days I wish it was a 0 structure but doesn't seem to work. I don't know.
Yeah.
So
that would be nice, but I don't know anyone who's capable of that. I think at some level, just because we have these very basic primal brains that kind of, you know, we were talking about how our brain is always trying to like conserve energy and not do any hard work and just wants to kick back and do nothing. I think everybody has to learn how to manage their mind. We have to learn how to manage our internal world if we're going to, you know, take care of the things that we need to take care of. And so it is going to be hard work. Yeah,
those are the days that I go to the gym more often. Because the gym somehow tires my body, but also calms my brain. It keeps me on a go, you know, from here I'll go back down to a level 2 whatever stress, and I can think a little bit better about other things. So it's surprising that even the days I'm more tired or feeling less like going to the gym are the days that I need it more, because that relation, I don't know what it is, but the gym and the emotion, or I now I know that perhaps it's an emotion, but all this chaos calms down. And I can start my, you know, continue with my day a little bit better than before.
And I would almost say just simply that any form of physical exercise, the mental and emotional benefits of that are massive, and that's what you experience. So yes, even on those days when you feel emotionally overwhelmed, getting out and using your body and doing some kind of movement helps to bring calm and helps to bring regulation to those overwhelming emotions. So yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
It is. Okay. I thought it was just tiredness. Okay, I'm tired, so I just it got down.
Yeah.
There's some crazy stuff that happens during and post workout or post activity. Even a walk, even a 10-minute walk, especially done cumulatively, you know, days in and days out and stuff like that. It's really the science behind it is super cool.
Awesome.
Well, let's wrap this up. That was about 50 minutes or so. That was a good one. So Katie's here, mask on. So Awesome. Thanks for coming in. Maria, thanks for those questions. That was awesome.
Yeah.
Oh, that's like, you're welcome, I guess. I didn't think emotions were, I don't know, name them as an emotion, you know, it's just, it's bored. Like I was saying, boredness, like, not, I don't know, or chaos. It's chaos and emotion is just
Yeah.
what we're dealing with.
Well,
But I
yeah.
never thought of it as something that I'm feeling. I thought it was something that we're living
That's happening to you.
through.
Mm.
Yeah, exactly. Everybody's going through this, so it's not a feeling itself. It's just the experience that we all are going through right now.
Mm.
But yeah, I like the one that, yeah, step back and see what is that I'm feeling. But I think a lot of me is just not knowing where to start or how to structure my day to the best convenience. I don't know. But thank you.
Oh yeah. So what I'll do is I'm recording this right now and I'll save it. I'll upload it to YouTube. So if you guys want to look back on it, and maybe I'll cut out a few clips that are like more digestible, just so people don't have to watch a 50-minute video to get, you know, 1 or 2 points. But and then I'll put this both in the Facebook group, and then like I said, I'll put it on YouTube as well. So you guys can go back. So all right, Colette, thanks for killing it.
Yeah, thanks, Mark. I always enjoy these conversations.
Katie, thanks for joining us. All right, everybody, have a great afternoon. Got to bounce. Peace out.